Welcome to School of Education. Today's topic is how to prepare a research proposal. There are different kinds of research proposal. However, we will be discussing educational research and how to prepare research proposals for or research proposal as part of any academic program like the PGDHE, that is Postgraduate Diploma in Higher Education, or MA Education program, or Master of Education program, or any research degree awarding program like the PhD. So, our focus will be on educational research, although you may find it useful in other social science related researches. Before we begin with the session, let me introduce the resource persons to you. On my right, Professor Santosh Panda, who is Professor of Distance Education, also former Director, Staff Training and Research, Institute of Distance Education. Presently, he is Head, Inter-University Consortium for ICT Enabled Education. On my extreme right is Professor N.K. Dash. He is a reader at School of Education. Both of them have several research papers to their credit, published nationally as well as internationally, and Professor Panda has authored books at national level as well as international level. Professor Panda is also a very well known distance educationist, not only at the national level and international level. As I said earlier, Dr. Dash also has edited a book and published research articles, and I am Eisha Kannadi, faculty at School of Education. So, now I would request Professor Panda to begin with the session. Professor Panda, please.
Thank you, Dr. Kannadi. It's a pleasure to be in this program. As you know, we all are students of education. We have been practicing teaching learning for quite a long period of time, and therefore we are very familiar with the kind of discourse and the design of our teaching learning processes that we have been undertaking for quite some time. But to do a doctoral work, a work which is of a very high standard in terms of research input as well as research process and output, we need to be a little serious about the kind of work that we do. And therefore, the first step, as we are going to discuss, after which Dr. Das will take up, is that how to select a research problem. After all, what is a research problem? As we all know, to define research, for instance, I mean the occurrence of the phenomena in the society, whether phenomena comprising of events, people, material goods and commodities, ideas, and so on and so forth, how they are occurring, in what process they are occurring, and with what consequence, and therefore what it or those phenomena would lead to. These are the possibilities of investigation within the classroom, outside the classroom. There are so many variables: psychological, sociological, pedagogic, instructional, teaching, learning, if we define pedagogic a little more further, political, historical, cultural, many variables affecting the phenomena, and therefore it would be prudent on our part to think of what exactly we are going to do, whether it is a part of our action research within the classroom, day-to-day problems, or it is a part of long-term investigation that we have to adopt, even for our doctoral study, for instance. Now, selecting a problem, we have something in our mind, whatever you have, maybe why students are coming late to the class, why students are dropping out. Starting from there, what are the variables which are affecting students? For instance, if we take dropout as an example, what are institutional, academic, teacher, administrative, campus or school complex, social, cultural, individual, family, political variables affecting dropout. Say, for instance, if you would like to say, there are many variables, we can club them together to be broad variables. But if that is the issue, for instance, that why students are coming late to the class, or for instance why students are dropping out, there could be many ways to locate that problem. If you are thinking of investigating that, say whatever the effect of such variables on students dropout, or the cause and effect relationship, or to undertake a case study, and all these things will come up in this program. Now, the first thing which will be facilitating us, as I understand, is that the professional experience that we have. Professional experience of yourself as an educator, professional experience of your own colleagues as peers, professional experience of our own teachers as experienced educators, professional experiences which have already been recorded, available either in print, audio, video, or whatever form they are recorded, or professional experiences which are spoken to each other, like people memorize listening to others and then tell you how things are, and so on and so forth. The professional experience is very important because it has got some historicity attached to it. Historically, these experiences are built up, and therefore any discipline, including education, I do suppose that education is a discipline, that these professional experiences investigated, critiqued, discussed, reflected, and so on and so forth, have been recorded. Even if they are not recorded, but still they lead to development of a discipline and form the knowledge base. And therefore, this knowledge base and translation of that knowledge base into action, as we call professional experience, would be one source of information for us to vet against, or to match with, that to compare and to find out at least that what exists earlier, and therefore my own experience and experiences of others would tell me, and therefore it would need certain kind of discussion at a distance along with colleagues physically face to face, and so on and so forth, going to the community and find out professionals, other professionals there who are working in the field, going to the classroom, talking to the teachers, and finding out what exactly could be the reasons why students are dropping out. The second is, if I derive a little bit, extend that knowledge base a little further, that what we have theories, like theories of learning, theories of teaching, theories of education, and so on and so forth. They may be derived from sociology, they may be derived from psychology, they may be derived from cultural studies, they may be derived from communication studies, etc. But if we per se think that education is a discipline, there are certain theories which we could call as educational. There are also certain theories which we would call as discipline based or disciplinary contribution for other disciplines, psychology, sociology more particularly. There could be others also, which contribute to the knowledge base, and therefore that is a strongly recorded, critiqued, peer reviewed knowledge base which is available, and therefore that knowledge base could be another source that we can check our problem, that can we get something, some region, some cause and effect, some explanation as to why students are dropping out. These, if I extend further little to as a recorded literature which are already recorded, because they are literature, they are available, they may be in print, audio, video form, but largely in print form in terms of journals, books, printed reports, circulated reports, maybe internal reports, dissertation, abstract, international. There are many indexing services which are Education Technology Index, Higher Education Index, and Sociology of Education Index. Many indexes are available. 3 indices are very important: the Australian one, the British one, and the ERIC, then the American one. So these 3 indices have been very important sources of information for all of us. Therefore, the literature, as we call in our doctoral work or any other research work, the review of related literature. This is the literature, these are the literature which are available to us in various forms, including the microfilm, microchip forms, and now of course internet, many things are available on the web, and therefore these are the sources which will be helping us, and these we will call as a review of related literature. We will discuss a little later when to exactly take up review of literature, whether before locating a problem, selecting a topic, or after that. The other source, there can be many others. We broadly classified into 4. If we show the first transparency, that these 4 sources of information we are talking about. One is professional experience. So professional experience, inferences from theory, professional literature, these 3 we have already discussed. The 4th one is the technology and social change. There can be many, but this last one, if we look at very closely, that there have been very significant technological changes. I don't mean to discuss here whether technology is leading society and education, or social and educational changes are bringing in technological changes, and therefore as per requirements. I think the first one is more correct, because technological developments are taking place. Therefore, in society, more particularly in education, we are bound at times to use technology for a variety of reasons. We are not getting into that discussion, but the point that I am trying to make is that these technological changes are instigating us, rather compelling us at times to think of relating the kind of problem that we are talking about for investigation in our doctoral or any other work must be related to some kind of technological change that is taking place in the society, and therefore technological change and social change, they are very much interrelated. Whatever is taking place in the society, things are changing. There is always a state of flux. I mean, always things are changing, the society is changing, and technology is guided, more particularly social changes these days, besides many other philosophical ideas and actions, social actions. And therefore, I think these are the four sources of information for selecting a problem. If I request Dr. Das to proceed with if once the problem has been selected, then how to design and how to develop a research proposal.
Thank you, Professor Panda. You have nicely presented that before conducting any kind of research activities, how a student or a researcher identifies or selects a problem, and you have nicely said about 4 major areas from which a researcher can deduce a problem. But the next important task for the researcher is how to prepare research proposal. Research cannot take place in vacuum. The research has to be spelled out in the beginning in the form of a proposal, and so in some universities they say that it is a synopsis, but mostly it is recognized as a research proposal. This is the most important task. So, what is a research proposal? Research proposal is a detailed plan which indicates the activities that are to be carried out to achieve the objectives the researcher has set for the research work. Basically, the researcher sets out certain objectives in the beginning of his research work, which have been generated out of the selection of the research problem. These objectives have to be spelled out in the research proposals, and for this the researcher has to prepare research proposal. It is just like a blueprint or a design that an architect prepares for the construction of a building. Like an architect prepares a blueprint on which the entire construction of the building takes place. Similarly, research proposal is just like a blueprint, it is a design, it is a plan, and according to which the entire activities that the researcher conducts are based on those planning activities. So, basically it is a plan or it is a design which the researcher prepares at the beginning of the research work. So, then the question arises, what are the different components of a research plan? Now, we can have a look at the next slide, major components of a research proposal. At this stage, we will give the detailed components of the research proposal, and later on we will discuss one by one in detail. One thing I would like to tell you, this research proposal, the various components what we have given here, that is one style which we feel perhaps that is the one alternative a researcher can follow. But if you look at different universities and different research institutions, they have their own style of developing a research proposals. So, the style or the format what we have planned here, first the title of the problem, then introduction to the study, then review of related literature, then statement of the problem, then definition of terms, then objectives of the study, then research questions / hypothesis, delimitations / limitations, then methodology of the study, implications of the study, time schedule and budget estimates. These are different components, broad components of a research proposal. Now, we will discuss in detail each component right from title of the study onwards. I would Aisha, you have anything to add at this point of time, so that we can proceed further.
You know, if we just start with a title of the problem, like we could perhaps discuss what are those particular terms we have to use when we are writing the title of the problem. the importance of the title of the problem. Whether the theme of the study should be reflected in the title of the problem or it reflects elsewhere. Whether the variables taken for the particular research study, that has to be reflected in the title of the problem or not. Whether the title of the problem has to be very precise or a very lengthy one. If that can be discussed now. Professor Panda.
When we look at many theses, even we look at the journal papers, even journal paper titles could also be thesis titles, for instance. So any title that we look at, any piece of research, and more importantly for education, we can take the help of the title dropout as an area of study. But the first thing is that the title must represent what exactly the study is going to do. The title could be that a study on institutional, academic and socio-cultural variables affecting student dropout in grade 8 in Delhi schools or Delhi public schools, for instance. It must very categorically say, therefore, by looking at the title, just reading the title, one could visualize what exactly the study is all about. One could also sense that what could be the objectives of the study, and therefore what are the reasons why this study was undertaken, and therefore what implications this study would have. These are 4-5 things that one could find immediately by looking at the title of the study. But we must keep one thing in mind, but the title, while we are looking at the title to represent almost everything about that piece of research, we must also take care that the title is not at all lengthy. So therefore, we have seen many theses where the title is so long that it wants to say everything about the study, but that is not the case. There is something which, say for instance, independent and dependent variables in an experimental study. There are certain intervening variables you want to parcel out, for instance, their effect. You have studied those variables, but you do not like to bring those variables into consideration while interpreting your result. There is no need to represent those variables in the title of the study. Even there is no need to bring in the idea that even to study the intervening variables in the title of the study. So therefore,
Professor Panda, suppose we have a title of the study like that, the effect of ICT in achievement. Would you say that I have not formulated, I would say the formulation of the title of the problem is not right, because it is too precise if I say, but if it also does not reflect, although the relationship is shown, ICT effect or impact on achievement.
Yeah, exactly so. So say for instance, as you said, that effect is very clear, because then we know what exactly is going to be done. But then as you said, ICT, effect of ICT on students,
even
understanding or
what
whatever,
level, maybe
what
school level or university.
We have to define first what that ICT is all about. One, whether it is an information technology, what kind of information technology, is an online learning, it's a computer mediated communication, it's a computer based training, and there are varieties about it. It's an interactive multimedia CD based study, and so on and so forth. Even ICT could also, if it is internet, CT communication technology, whether it is audio video, whether it is a teleconferencing, and so on and so forth. There might be an effect of telephone, for instance, on.
Exactly.
So that needs to be defined. So that ICT at what level is also to be defined. So the ICT or television, Delhi school television, for instance, it clearly says that this is a school television program broadcast by Delhi Doordarshan, for instance, the oldest Delhi school television, in fact the oldest school television in the country. Then if you say that effect of ICT on children, we need to first decide what kind of children, boys and girls, children represent boys and girls put together, fine, good. Which group, in what class, what grade, where, in which state. I mean, something needs to be spelled out. But then the important thing is that the effect of ICT on children, but on what? On what of children? Because human beings comprise of so many variables, say on the academic achievement in grade 8 or something of that sort. So all these need to be defined, but defined in such a way that the title must be a representative one. We can write for the first time the title, cut it down second time, third time we can also do that. So this is one way, but we must be very careful that we should not bring in such words in the title which will be very difficult later on to justify, very pompous words which we feel very thrilling, but later on we find it very difficult. But one thing is very clear, that whatever title we finally suggest as our piece of research and title for our piece of research, that must be related to that area of study, because that area of study is very important. If it is a psychological study relating to the effect of information and communication technology for a particular grade children, that area of study must be very categorically specified. Why I say this? Because that area of study will tell later on what kind of literature survey that we have to undertake, because so much of literature, voluminous of literature, what exactly we have to consult to finally focus our piece of investigation, that would be determined by that. So therefore the title is very important. This is number one. If we come down after title, as Dr. Das pointed out in that transparency, and Dr. Eisha also hinted, that let us go one by one. Second is the introduction to this study. Now once title we have decided, now we are talking about the project proposal or the research proposal. We have not gone into doing research right now. So therefore in the proposal, number two, the introduction to this study. Now introduction has to very precisely talk about what this study is all about, from where it got generated and what process it is leading to, and therefore what kind of implications it might draw. After introduction, we have a heading also that what kind of policy implication, other implications that the study might suggest at the end of the research. But the introduction has to be very comprehensive, representing all these. While reading the introduction, one could also get a sense that what kind of objectives are coming up, if there is a hypothesis, what kind of design is coming up, and so on and so forth.
So by and large, Professor Panda, putting the study, the proposed study in a context. Introduction should have
introduction that. Provides a context to the study, and context means the background to the study. It could be a theoretical background, it might be happening which has happened, it might be some functional background which is already existing, but more precisely I must say, there must be some theoretical background behind that study, and therefore introduction needs to introduce that. This is number one. And more particularly, the introduction has to say categorically that what is that theory behind that particular study, and therefore theoretical background seems to be very important. If we get to the transparency, we will see that there are 4 points in that number one, it provides a context to the study, I mean from where the study got originated, and justifies the need for the study. Of course, there is a later on a heading that justification for the study. Number two, it provides a theoretical background to the study. There must be theory behind. If there is no theory, if we do a piece of research, that piece of research might contribute to a theory, but there must be something, a vague hazy theory somewhere based on some principles, some axioms, somewhere it is there that we must refer to that. Without referring to that, and therefore we cannot do a literature survey, because on what we have to do literature survey? Once we determine that this is the circumference of our research, and therefore the theoretical background or theoretical possibilities would determine what would be the limitation of that study. Introduction also has to say that why we have undertaken this study. It has to categorically mention, of course that why part will be coming up little later in more specific ways. Also it has to say that what we are going to study. So therefore what to study and why to study, as you see in the transparency on the screen, that it deals with what to study and why to study. Finally, it also reflects the utility of the study for improving educational policy and practice. Of course the policy word is not there, but educational policy and practice, that finally we must categorically say for teachers, for students, for administrators, for general public, for parents, and so on and so forth. There are many stakeholders, if I could use that word, it was a very managerial word to use the word stakeholder. There are many stakeholders in education, and therefore we must have some implications for a category of people, 2 categories of people or 5 categories of people who are involved in educational exercise. I think more precisely the introduction has to talk about this.
Now one thing, Professor Panda, would like to tell our viewers or those who are going to develop research proposal for their research work. In many research proposal there are variations. For example, in some research proposals one would find introduction to the topic or introduction to the problem. In some proposals people write background of the proposal, background of the problem, study. Background of the study, and so in some proposals people write, researchers they write rationale of the study. So basically whether it is introduction or background of the study or rationale of the study, these 4 of high major points that Professor Panda has highlighted, they should or need to be reflected. Now, once the researcher has spelled out the introduction to the study, then the next task, how review of related literature contributes both to the development of the theoretical framework or theoretical background, as well as it contributes to the methodology of the study. Would you kindly
see the point that you are also trying to make, and I must clarify a little bit, that next comes what is called a review of related literature. But say the distinction between an introduction and a review of related literature, what we said that to provide a background to the study is that the background would broadly indicate or hint or signpost the basic theme of the discourse or the research investigation, which will be studied in more detail in what is called a review of related literature. Once this introduction in the proposal is over, we go to the next point of review of related literature. There is certain, if we go to the transparency, you will see there are 4 points that we have mentioned in the review of related literature. One, that it contributes to the development of theoretical framework. 2, that it helps in identifying the gaps in the existing knowledge base, and 3, that it provides basis for justifying the need of the study, and 4, that it helps in selecting research methodology appropriate for the study. These 4 functions that a review of related literature would be. But my submission before I proceed explaining a minute or two about this is that there are many who contend that review of related literature should form another chapter in the proposal, and therefore in the research study or the doctoral thesis. There are some who would believe that this review of related literature would form an integral part of the introduction, because once you finish reviewing the related literature, then only you are able to specify categorically your problem and so on and so forth, and therefore you could talk about your design.
There is also some would say that review of related literature would give you the existing gaps as we mentioned in our slide, and therefore you can derive why you want to conduct a particular study, whether to fill the gap, finding a lacuna there. So therefore a review of related literature comes before the rationale of the study.
Absolutely. My personal preference, if you ask me, would go that I would like to include review of related literature in the introduction itself, without giving a specific space for reviewing later on for review of related literature as a chapter. I think the kinds of thesis we are having today have drastically modified themselves, and the books that we are getting, that review of related literature is a part of introduction, and which will critically review, as we have said 4 points, that we have to review literature, those which are related exclusively to the study. We have to see, at least from the title, whether that literature is that piece of journal writing or the book or whatever chapter is related to my particular chosen field of study, research study or not. So therefore we have to review in such a way that it will be contributing to the theoretical framework, and therefore it has to review certain theoretical framework which is the basis for my study, which I have already introduced in the introduction of the proposal or the study. It will be also, when I review that, I find that there are certain gaps with focus of investigation. So if I do not do that, I mean, how can I do that without reviewing related literature? And 3, of course, it will be providing a base for it will justify my study, why I am going to study, because there are certain reinterpretations needed, certain gaps are there which I would like to study, and so on and so forth. And of course, once we review, we get to know more categorically in a more focused way what could be the design for my study. I think review of related literature, and therefore I must caution one thing over here, is that in many theses that we find that one after another author, we go on reviewing and give a paragraph 2 and 3, whatever, a sentence 1, 2 or 3, but review of related literature is not like that. Review of related literature is collection of literature, going through those literature, all kinds of literature, including dissertation, abstract, international, because you get only abstract, there is no dissertation at hand actually. If we can get hold of dissertation online, many are available, it is fine. We have to critically study that literature, and based on the variables of our study, we go on critiquing those literature and try to find out if there is any gap or not, rather than saying that thus 1999 said this, as 2001 said this, Panda 2003 said this, and Eisha 2005 also said this, and so on and so forth. It is no way to review literature. It is simply copying from that literature and jotting down and creating a chapter of 30-40 pages. I will be too happy if the review of related literature is just 4 to 5 pages and tell us what categorically has been done, and therefore what are the gaps what exactly I am going to do to address that particular issue, and how this literature review is helping me to locate all these, and more particularly for the design of my study. I think these are very important one. Now, once review of related literature is over, I think now it is time in the proposal, and therefore in the thesis we must say that what is that problem. Would you like to take up and comment on that, this statement?
Dr. Dash, before you begin, like, let me pose a question to you, like, how would you say that statement of the problem, or how different statement of the problem from title of the study?
Yeah, actually in the beginning Professor Panda has told you about the title of the problem or title of the study. Generally a title, in the title you find the problem in the abstract form, and they are though it reflects many things which Professor Panda has told you, but they are mostly in the abstract form. But when you come to stating the problem in the statement form, then you expand whatever you have mentioned in your title. So, it is basically primarily an expansion of the title of the study which you have mentioned in the beginning of your research proposal. And here in the statement of the problem, your major and sub objectives, major objectives as well as sub objectives must be reflected. That does not mean that you have to write those objectives, the objectives have to be written separately, but a reader or those who are going to scrutinize your proposal, they can get an idea from the statement of the problem that what would be your major objectives and what would be your secondary objectives. Then it would also communicate to the reader or the people or the examiner or the proposal who is going to scrutinize the proposals about the methodology of the study. Then it also describes the scope and area of the study. So, basically these are the different functions which have to be covered under the statement of the problem. Let us take an example. If you are taking this, for example, the case the case of proposal which Professor Panda referred to, study of dropout in 8th grade in the list course. So, you can straight away in the title you can mention that dropouts in Delhi, particularly in 8th grade, and their impact on different aspects of schooling processes. So, that may be stated in a very abstract manner, but when you come to stating the problem, here you have to specify or clearly jot down what you are going to do. So, basically in stating the problem you should reflect the objectives, then sometimes the methodology of the study, all this have to be reflected. So, basically statement of the problem and the title, they are though they are similar to each other in some manner, but statement of the problem is slightly in an expansive form of the title. But you would find in most research works and theses that very often the title of the study is again repeated as the statement of the problem, and in most universities this is the practice. Perhaps I would like to personally I would like to emphasize, while stating the problem it should be a little expansion form of title rather than the same repetition of the title. What is your view about this?
You see, when we extend that title to what is called a statement of the problem, you have already mentioned those 4 points. When we expand that, the problem itself, the statement of the problem itself must also talk about as you said, it must reflect the design of the study. It must also say that what model or within what framework you are going to study that. If you are talking about dropout, for instance, we have a few models available in dropout. The earliest model of the Tinto model of dropout, which Kember and others later on expanded to what is called a linear model of dropout, including all these variables, social as well as academic variables. Tinto's model, for instance, says that there are many sociological factors, including community and social caste, creed, if we interpret in our Indian context, contributing to, as well as academic variables contributing to. One, say they studied the undergraduate student coming to study on campus. These two variables, including campus socialization, which is categorized as a sociological variable rather than academic variable. This is a model which is in a way leading a student to decide at the end of the day, at the end of the year, whether one would continue study or would like to drop out. And therefore, dropout is exclusive dropout. It is not a question of coming back again and so on. Therefore, one might come back to another institution, but for that institution concerned, it is a dropout. Kemper says that no, there is a linear model. From one step to the other, one proceeds, and one stage one decides, including a cost benefit analysis that the student does, that whether I would like to continue my study, because economically am I gaining anything for this, which is in fact a strong variable. But there are certain others who would like to say that there is nothing like a prefixed model insofar as dropout is concerned. Both psychological, social variables contribute to that, and therefore it would be better that if we study dropout qualitatively in context. And therefore, what I am trying to say is that these three models, frameworks would suggest us what exactly you are trying to focus. You are trying to give a fourth model, a fourth framework, and statement of the problem would categorically state that, and it would also say the problem, where to study, how to study, with whom to study, and therefore with what consequence. I think statement would expand the objective of the title of the study.
Then the second next stage in the proposal is to spell out the objective of the study in detail. When you spell out the objectives, generally in many research proposal one would find objectives only a single set of objectives, but in many proposals there are two sets of objectives, major objectives, that is the major objective of the study, and there are minor objectives. For example, if you are going to study say the relationship between achievement, motivation and academic achievement, this motivation and achievement, academic achievement, this may be the major objective of the study, but there are many other minor objectives in terms of sex difference and then rural urban background difference, and there are so many other which can form minor objectives of the study. So they can be spell out in objectives of the study, and always objectives have to be written in action form. Action oriented words or action oriented verbs should be used to write objectives. For example, to study the relationship between motivation and academic achievement. This to study, to examine, to appraise, these are action oriented verbs which should form the part of objective writing. Then the next important question is to formulate research question or hypothesis. Generally, whenever we think of any kind of research work, maybe for MA dissertation or MPhil dissertation or PhD work or any type of project work, research questions are very important things.
Would you like to distinguish between objectives and research questions?
At the objective stage, what you are doing, you are mentioning the entire purpose of your study, both in major and minor forms. In order to achieve those objectives, you formulate certain research questions. These research questions, what happens in some kinds of study, these research questions, they directly guide your research work, but in some other form of studies, research questions, they are again translated into hypothesis. That we would later on in the next session we would discuss in detail how research questions they are formulated to hypothesis, in what type of studies, and in what type of studies research questions are only formulated to guide the research work. I would here say that if the objective is to predict the outcome, then the researcher should go for hypothesis formation. If the aim is only to find out the existing fact, which is generally in survey kind of research and other kind of research, there perhaps research questions are more suitable than hypothesis. Now I would request Dr. Eisha to differentiate a little further between research questions and hypothesis, then we would go to other parts of research proposal.
Yeah. So, research questions are by and large, as Dr. Dash already put it, certain questions you formulate based on the objectives or in the overall framework of your study, what your hunches like. Hypotheses are also a kind of hunches, but while research questions may not be tested, hypothesis, if when you formulate them, you have to test the hypothesis using different techniques available for that. And moreover, hypothesis we may write in different forms, like a research hypothesis, which may be directional or non-directional. Then we have a null hypothesis, which does not give any kind of direction, as it is from the term itself is you can make out. So, but definitely based on the hypothesis, you have to use the technique to test it, and your data collection, before that your sampling, everything would depend on the kind of a hypothesis also you formulate, like what you want to do next. And whereas research questions are the kind of questions you formulate to guide you to find out what you want to arrive at finally, what you are seeking, what you are looking for. Research questions you do not test them, whereas hypotheses are tested, and hypothesis you may not have to formulate a hypothesis in all kinds of a study, as he already pointed out.
But here I would like to tell us that both research questions as well as the hypothesis, they have importance in selection of research methods as well as other aspects of research methodology. But when you are formulating research questions in for example, in survey kind of research or other forms of research, research questions again they provide a direction to the further research work. Similarly, hypotheses in experimental research, they also provide direction for further research work. So, both these aspects, research questions and hypotheses, they have their own importance in conducting a research study. Now, the next step is definition of terms. Generally, when we prepare research proposal and in the statement of the problem and this title, we use certain technical terms. They have to be explained in operational terms. And at this stage, we also spell out or write limitation and delimitation of the study. Limitations, which limitation are those conditions which are beyond the control of the researcher, and delimitations are those are the scope of the study in terms of methodological details. So, these have to be also spelled out in a research proposal. With this, we end this session.